Welcome to Fantastic History. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Chloe.
We're a husband and wife duo who enjoy telling each other about amazing events, people, and mysteries throughout history. Because this is the first episode of October, y'all know I had to bring you something ghoulish.
Oh, something spooky?
Spooky, but definitely ghoulish.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to try something a little different that I hope you'll enjoy. Folks in the Victorian era had a lot of really bizarre, iconic beliefs and customs around death.
Mm-hmm.
So today I've brought some actual newspaper articles from that time that really emphasize what a gloriously, death wacky time it was.
Okay.
So a lot of this stuff, we need to bring this back. They're just crazy. So let's jump right in. I'm going to start with a fun job I've never heard of. Tombstone censor. So this is from the Harrisburg Patriot of June 22nd, 1905. A tombstone censor is employed by most large cemeteries. It is the duty of this man to see that nothing unseemly in the way of a tombstone is put up. A young engineer in a Norristown mill was killed by the explosion of a boiler, and the family of this young man, believing that the mill owners had known all along that the boiler was defective, actually had carved on the tombstone the sentence, "Murdered by his masters." The tombstone censor, of course, refused to sanction such an epitaph. On the death of a certain noted prize fighter, the surviving brother of the man wanted to put in a glass case beside the grave a championship belt, 4 medals, a pair of gloves, and other triumphs of the ring. But the censor's negative was firm. A widow who believed that the physician was responsible for her husband's death wished to put on the tomb, "He employed a cheap doctor." But the tombstone censor showed her that such an inscription would lay her open to heavy damages for libel. Atheists sometimes direct their wills that shocking blasphemies be carved on their monuments. The censor, however, sees to it that these blasphemies do not disfigure the cemetery.
Wow.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's still a thing. If you can kind of put could you carve a penis into a piece of marble and have that be the tombstone? If that was somebody's final wishes,
I would assume probably not.
Probably not, right? So maybe somebody still has the job of tombstone censor.
Well, I guess it depends because I assume now there's probably specific rules and regulations when you sign up to to reserve your plot.
Right, it's in the contract.
Yeah, so you don't
no penises, no blasphemies, and no libel.
Yeah.
Probably. It's their top 3.
Yeah. And I would assume a part of it might be we want to keep the whole cemetery looking a certain way. We don't want something that's just crazy in there that's going to throw off the whole aesthetic, such as Nicolas Cage's pyramid, obsidian pyramid in New Orleans, is it?
Yes, it is. That's exactly what I was thinking of, because New Orleans cemeteries, it's a very specific vibe.
Yeah.
And to all of a sudden have this giant pyramid, it's just what?
Right.
Yeah. I don't know, man.
I would assume that the censor has been removed and replaced by a lawyer.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
But I could be wrong.
I mean, we'll find out. Guys, if you know, please write in. fantastichistorypod@gmail.com. Are you a tombstone censor? Let us know.
Yeah.
All right. So famously, the death of a loved one in Victorian times meant wearing mourning clothes for months, sometimes years, depending on your relationship to the corpse in question. This meant wearing all black, no jewelry or adornments, and for women, it meant wearing black veils to conceal yourself anytime you were going to be seen by anyone but your closest family members. Predictably, there were some people who weren't very into that. So here's testimony from one such person printed in the Kansas City Times on October 16th, 1885. "I predict the extinction of the mourning veil," said a handsome widow in the hearing of a Daily News reporter as she unfastened the flowing, cumbersome badge of grief and hung it wearily on her arm. Physicians, have always cried out against the wearing of crepe. They declare it to be one of the worst things possible for a grief-stricken mind. The very weight of a heavy crepe veil is enough to depress one, and I don't mind telling you, they are the very worst things to manage. The first time I ventured out into a streetcar with my long veil settled it. I caught it in the door when I entered, and as I seated myself, nearly jerked my bonnet off my head. The conductor released the veil, and as I prepared to gather it about me, a fat woman put her foot through it, and a horrid young man opposite grinned. By far, the most complete mourning effect is produced by a costume composed entirely of veiling. Really, it just makes a woman look as if she could never smile again. This lady had her bonnet snatched off her head by the doors on the streetcar, and she is done.
It sounds like she just had a very bad morning, and she was just like, you know what? I'm done with this.
Yeah, I'm bringing down the whole system, baby.
Yeah.
Had it. She's had it. Now, there are a couple of reasons to be against mourning clothes, obviously, that being one of them. The first comes from a book called Manners and Social Usages that was published in 1887. People with weak eyes or lungs must not wear a heavy crepe veil over the face. It is loaded with arsenic and is most dangerous to sight and breath.
Oh, my.
Madam, that is an understatement if I've ever heard one. Like, yeah, arsenic is not at all conducive to being able to breathe. You're 100% right.
Yeah.
What? So that was just in the dye that they were using. Arsenic was just part of the black dye, and it's smothering you all day long.
Yeah, that's not ideal.
No. Another valid reason to not be on board with mourning clothes can be deduced from this helpful tutorial found in an 1849 issue of Godey's magazine. Ladies that wear mourning in the summer are much incommoded by the blackness it leaves on the arms and neck, and which cannot easily be taken off by mere soap and water. To have a remedy always at hand, keep on your washing stand a box or galley cup with a cover, containing a mixture in equal portions of cream of tartar and oxalic acid. Get at a druggist half an ounce of each of these articles and have them mixed and pounded together in a mortar. Put some of this mixture into a galley cup and moisten it slightly with a little water to prevent its after a while becoming too dry and hard, and cover it closely. To use it, wet the black stains on your skin all over with water, and then with your finger rub a little of the mixture. Then immediately wash it off with water and afterwards with soap and water. The black will thus entirely disappear.
Oh my gosh.
If you're wondering what oxalic acid is used for today, it's most commonly a solvent that removes rust from metal.
So they're burning these stains off of their skin.
Yeah.
And obviously taking it off immediately with water, because if they left it on too long,
it's going to just eat right through your skin. See, that's what's so crazy is everything was poisonous in the Victorian era. Everything was either poison or cocaine, pretty much.
Yeah.
And so if even in what year was that again? 1849. Even in 1849, they're okay, make sure you wash this off immediately. That's really bad. That's as bad as it can be.
So why was it that? I mean, I'm sure folks had dark clothes, right? So why is this different?
Because it had to be solid black. And what a lot of people would do instead of buying black clothes, which some people did buy black clothes, but a lot of what you would do, especially if you're a widow, because the assumption is that you will now be in mourning for the rest of your life. You won't remarry, you won't, rejoin society, whatever, is that you will take all of the clothes you own right now and dye them black. Because you'll never not need black again.
Oh.
Yeah.
Was it a stigma to wear black? Because you might be mistaken as one of those horrid widows?
I mean, it wasn't a stigma necessarily, but all black was reserved for mourning. It was just kind of a social custom. If someone sees you in all black, they're going to treat you as though you're in mourning. So you just wouldn't dress that way.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's a lot of rules around somebody else dying for whatever reason.
I believe it.
Yeah. So you've been breathing arsenic all day long. It's left arsenic stains on your skin, and now you need to burn it off with a rust remover. This is very normal.
Yeah.
Now, it wasn't just people, though, who dressed in mourning. Black crepe was also put on the home of the recently deceased to mark their passing. This naturally led to shenanigans. From the August 29th, 1868 edition of the Boston Traveler, a St. Louis husband, after a quarrel with his wife, took a singular revenge by putting crepe on his door and announcing her death. This so enraged the lady that she immediately eloped with an affinity.
Oh my God.
Uh-huh. So they had a huge fight. He was like, I'm just going to tell everybody you're dead. I'm sick of it. Like, I'm so sick of you. And she's like, okay, I'm dead to you, bitch. Bye. And ran off with her boyfriend.
So yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty petty.
It's pretty petty, but get this. A similar, yet to me, like more sinister feeling story comes from the Commercial Advertiser on November 27th, 1874. A little 6-year-old maiden in Norwich last week was reprimanded by her father for something, and being indignant thereat, went out and tied crepe on the front door, remarking, "Now everyone will wonder as they go by who is dead in our house."
Jeez.
This kid is a ghoul.
A little twerp.
Uh-huh. He's like, you know what? You need to eat your vegetables or you cannot have any weird Victorian cake. And she's like, really? Now everybody's going to think I'm dead. Are you happy?
That's like the equivalent of putting of sending in a false obituary and having people show up at your house with food.
Yeah.
And be like, oh, we thought you were dead.
You know, as always, there's an episode of The Golden Girls for this.
Oh.
There's an episode where, like, I'm pretty sure it was Blanche, like somebody like prints an obituary by mistake, like somebody with a similar name to Blanche Devereaux. And so she starts getting all these calls and flowers from all these men who are just brokenhearted. Oh no, Blanche Devereaux is dead. And like once it gets cleared up, she kind of like misses the attention.
Of course.
Just like, of course she does, because she's Blanche.
That's funny.
So we know what the mourners in their houses are wearing. But what about the dead themselves? Shrouding was the hotness at this time. A lot of women even made their own shrouds, not because they were sick or had premonitions of death, but just as like a normal thing you did because you would need it eventually. You're going to die. You'll need a shroud.
Yeah.
You don't want to be an inconvenience to anyone else because you're a woman in the Victorian era, so you just make your own shroud, right? Like,
I mean, death was a more personal experience back then because you didn't have funeral homes.
Right.
There wasn't a lot of industry with death like there is today.
This is like the Victorian era is when it started.
Yeah.
When death became an industry for sure.
So, I mean, like when someone died, you did have to do a lot of things.
Oh yeah.
You may have to have someone make the casket.
Right, yeah.
Because I don't even know if you could get a commercially made casket at that time, or if it was like made to order. I don't know if there were people making it, but you certainly had to take care of the body,
right,
yourself.
You displayed it in your home.
Yeah,
yeah. So, yeah, it was a much more hands-on time.
Oh
with
yeah,
death, for sure. But not everyone had the time or the inclination to make their own shroud.
Okay.
See, everything's not for everybody. And sometimes those left behind were responsible for going out and buying a shroud. Here's a piece from the Cincinnati Enquirer from February 21st, 1868. This morning we were made acquainted with a few facts in relation to a singular affair which occurred in the West End a few days ago. It seems an elderly lady living in that part of the city had been sick for some months past, and a few days ago she fell into a stupor and was supposed to have died. Her husband, believing she had passed from this world, began to make the usual preparations for burial, and with this end in view, came up to town and purchased the material to make the shroud. Upon his return home with his purchase, he was astonished and horrified to find his wife, whom he had left for dead, not only alive, but sitting propped up in her bed, looking better than she had for some months.
Oh.
As a matter of course, he was agreeably surprised and lost no time in putting the linen he had bought for his wife's shroud in some secret hiding place to prevent her being painfully reminded of the fact that he had been in such haste to dispose of her body. That is awkward. You come home, you're just like whistling, like kind of doing a little dance down the street with your linen. You walk in, she's alive, and it's just like, this is nothing. Don't look here. How are you feeling?
You quickly toss it into the shrubs.
Yep.
While her back is turned.
Yep.
That's a little embarrassing.
It is awkward. That is an uncomfy conversation to need to have.
Now, real quick.
Yeah.
We're going to spend a lot of time on this, but can you clarify exactly what a shroud is in this context?
In this context, I mean, it's basically just like a white linen, like a big piece of cloth that you would wrap around the body. Like, it's not an outfit, it's not a veil really, but it's like the wrappings that you would put over somebody.
So the body is dressed.
Right.
And you put this around them and you can still see the body.
Yeah, because it's linen. It's usually like a really loose knit fabric. So it's like sheer. You can still see them, but you would probably put it on before, like between visitation and the burial. But like if, say, people are looking at them in their coffin, they would already have their shroud.
Is it to inspire like an ethereal property to them, or?
I don't know. It does seem to me that because it was like a trend, really, that it is more about optics than, because what's a piece of linen doing? It's not like preserving the body like mummies' wrappings or something, like.
Well, it makes me think of people who like dress up as Obi-Wan Kenobi at Comic-Con, but then they put a blue shroud around them so they look like a Force ghost.
Right, yeah. They were just, they wanted all their bodies to look like Force ghosts.
Okay.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because that's the reason why the sort of stereotypical ghost is just you put a sheet over yourself. It's a shroud. Yeah. That image of a ghost is from the Victorian times when they were using shrouds.
As if the body got up and was walking around.
With the shroud, yep.
Really?
Yes. That is the shroud. Yep.
What?
Today I learned. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Isn't that fun?
If you learned that for the first time, please let us know, because I certainly did.
Yeah. So that's there. I probably could have just said that. That's what a shroud is. Picture a ghost with a sheet on. There you go. Shroud. Boom. But let's shift gears now to something that's more my speed, which is wacky mishaps with dead bodies.
Oh, fantastic.
Yay! So this story comes from the Louisville Courier-Journal on July 23rd, 1894. This one's a little bit longer. It's not terrible, but just kind of stick with me here. I'm not a believer in the supernatural, said a young man to a writer for the Courier-Journal. But every time I see a copy of Wilkie Collins' novel, The Woman in White, I get the creeps, for it recalls one of the most awful experiences in my life. I boarded in the southern portion of the city at the home of a widow, in whose family was an interesting youth about 16 years old. He and I were exceedingly fond of one another, perhaps from the fact that he was afflicted with epilepsy and I was the only person about the house who understood how to relieve him and was able to handle him without his hurting himself while in convulsions. He did not live long after I knew him and died in my arms in one of his attacks. The incident I am speaking of occurred on one of the very coldest nights in January. The boy had died at noon, and the family sat up with the corpse until midnight, when I relieved them in the watch, requesting all to retire, as I loved the boy so well I felt it my duty to stay near him in death. An hour passed, and I picked up a copy of The Woman in White to while away the somber watch. I drew near the fireplace and turned up the lamp a little higher, as the rest of the room was very dark, and a window was raised back of the corpse on the cooling board. After all had gone to bed, the realization of the somber situation obtruded itself upon me, and as I perused the novel, its contents were not calculated to reassure me. I thought about everything possible, and for the first time in my life, I began to quake with fear. I was in such a condition of mind that the dropping of a pin would have been noted at once, and the creaking of a piece of furniture or the swaying of a shutter would have sent terror through my heart. In this overwrought state of mind, I heard a light noise and turned toward the corpse when, awful to relate, I saw my friend raise his hands, throw back the shroud, and sit stark upright. The eyes, which had never been closed, looked searchingly about the room until they rested on me. The open mouth contracted, and the countenance took a distorted expression. Without pausing, I dashed from the room into the dark corridors. When I think of that awful scene, even in daytime, I am filled with terror. I have never got into The Woman in White farther than 3 chapters, and I do not think now that I shall ever finish the story that is so intimately associated with this awful ghost story in real life.
Whoa.
Whoa.
That is creepy.
It is very uncomfy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't love that. Don't love that. I love the fact that he's just like, I got about 3 chapters into the book, but I'm just going to have to call it because I have never been more terrified in my life.
I feel you.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Okay, but here's the thing. All of that was just a lead up to the thing I really want to talk about, and that's all the wild ways that people died during the Victorian era. There's some crazy deaths. I don't know why this period of time was so cuckoo bananas, but it really was.
All right.
So these first 3 stories come from the Yorkshire Evening Post. So these 3 are from England. The rest are American newspapers. This first one is dated November 22nd, 1922. A verdict of accidental death was returned by the Leeds coroner at an inquest today on George Arthur Appleton, 46, railway signalman of Knowle Parade, Hare Hills, who died at the Leeds infirmary yesterday as a result of being knocked down by a train on the Northeastern Railway line just outside Leeds on the previous day. Richard Herbert, signalman, who relieved Appleton at the signal box, said he saw him go toward Leeds station on the 4-foot way. He noticed that a train coming from Marsh Lane was almost on top of Appleton, and he shouted, "Look out, George!" But it was too late. When he saw the engine would inevitably go over Appleton, he momentarily shut his eyes. He looked again after the train had passed. Appleton had been pushed about 15 feet by the engine. Witnesses said that at the time a train was passing from Leeds, and probably the noise of this train drowned that of the other train. So there was one train coming, it drowned out the noise of the other train, so he didn't even know the train was coming.
Right.
The driver of the engine said that he had no idea that he had run over a man until he arrived in Leeds station, when he found a piece of brown jacket hanging onto the exhaust pipes.
Mm.
Ugh. The next story was from several years earlier, February 2nd of 1891. It starts out kind of normal, but just stay with me here. And also, I'm going to butcher this name. We're just going to have to move on.
Hey, we've all done it.
What are you going to do? Mr. Edward Bosanquet? Question mark.
Sorry. Say it one more time.
Bosanquet.
Bosanquet.
Bosanquet. Bosanquet.
That's a tough one.
It's you know what?
Maybe a listener knows how to pronounce that.
I really doubt it, but you know what? Send me a voice memo if you know.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so Mr. Edward, son of the well-known English banker, was bitten on Saturday by a rattlesnake while he was out shooting near Dayton, Florida.
Oof.
The snake struck him on the inside of the leg above the ankle. Mr. Evelyn Walker, which by the way, it does say Mr. Evelyn Walker. It's I guess a dude named Evelyn, but anyway. Mr. Evelyn Walker, who was with Mr. immediately applied his mouth to the wound and endeavored to suck out the poison. Then, having tightly bandaged the wounded leg, Mr. Walker raised his friend upon his shoulder and carried him to Dayton. It is feared, however, that all these gallant exertions to save the life of his friend have proved to no avail. Mr. Bosanquet is reported to be in a hopeless condition. Mr. Walker himself is also now seriously ill. It seems that he had a slight cut on his lip and absorbed some of the poison into his system.
Oh, no.
On his arrival to Dayton, broken down with fatigue, he was seized with an attack which resembled partial paralysis. Last evening, however, he was rather better, and it was believed he was out of danger.
Man.
Yikes.
That's pretty bad.
Uh-huh. So Mr. died.
Uh-huh.
The other guy was doing better at the time of the printing, had started to come around, but just a little cut on your lip, you don't realize it's there, and it absorbs snake venom.
Well, I had heard that the whole thing of sucking the venom out is a complete wives' tale of itself.
Interesting.
that it doesn't work.
Right.
Because by the time you could even get to it, it's already proceeding through your bloodstream.
Right.
So you're not going to like catch up with it.
You're right. Yeah. That'd be pretty wild.
But I guess there was just enough.
I mean, there's still going to be some, like if you get to it like right away, there's still going to be some there, I guess. Like, I don't know. Because if you've ever seen like a snake bite, like this person has lived, they've gotten their treatment or whatever, the wound is still pretty gnarly looking.
Yeah.
Implying that there is still venom around the site that's like kind of messing with the tissue and stuff there. And it's also in your bloodstream, so it's going to be too late to like save somebody that way, obviously, because this guy died.
Yeah.
But there's still some venom like right there. And
clearly enough.
Yeah, seems that way. Or maybe, I mean, like he was in Florida, the water there is pretty gnarly. Like maybe he just drank swamp water and got really sick from that.
Unrelated.
And it's a coincidence. Yeah, totally unrelated. We don't know. It's the 1800s, baby. Anything could happen.
That is true. That is true.
All right, so this next one is from the April 30th, 1901 issue, and it's my favorite one that I found from the Yorkshire Evening Post. A few days ago, two gentlemen were cycling from Guildford to London, and when proceeding down Effingham Hill at a fair pace, they overtook a carriage and pair containing two ladies. A small fox terrier belonging to the ladies was gambolling about in the road. As the cyclists were passing the carriage, the dog got in front of one of the machines, was run over, and the unfortunate cyclist was pitched with considerable violence into the road. The ladies got out of the carriage and ran to the assistance of the dog, which they fondled and made a great fuss of, and then they got into their carriage and drove away without so much as casting a glance at the ill-starred cyclist who was lying dead in a ditch.
Whoa.
They're like, is my dog okay?
And this man is just dead.
He's just dead. The dog was fine.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You know, the more things change, but people stay the same.
Yep.
You can see that thing happening like on Facebook or on TikTok right now, and you'd be like, this is a sign of the times. Nah, man.
Yeah, no. If there was like an incident involving some random human being and our dog, I would not care about that person except to scream at them. I would be worried about the dog. So
no.
That being said, if like the person was just like almost instantly dead because they, you know, hit their head on the ground or whatever, I would call 911.
You'd do something.
Right. You wouldn't just put the dog back in the carriage and just keep on going.
Without a care in the world.
Yeah. You know.
Yeah.
All right. So next we have a story from the Jackson Citizen, printed on November 23rd, 1900. Mrs. Mary Adams, 35, wife of Isaac Adams, a young farmer of Collie, 3 miles above here, died last night. She prepared her burial gown 2 months ago. 2 hours before she died, she arose, went to her trunk, and dressed in her burial robe, telling her husband she wanted no change made in her dress. Her last words were, "Thank the Lord, I'll soon be gone. My suffering is over." She then died.
Whoa.
Directly over her bed, the clock ceased to tick as the last breath left her. All efforts to start the clock have proved futile. Owing to this strange coincidence, the husband will leave his once happy home. Creepy.
That's a really weird story.
Yeah.
Very little detail.
Mm-hmm. But like, so 2 months ago, she got the burial gown ready. Then a couple hours before she died, she puts the burial gown on, is like, don't change my clothes. Thank God, I'm about to die. I'm sick of it. Lays down, dies, the clock stops. And her husband's like, this is all too much. I got to get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
Weird.
It's weird.
It is very weird.
I don't blame him.
So finally, I'd like to present to you an unusual story from the Marietta Daily Ledger from December 20th of 1900. Mrs. Catherine Alt, aged 44, of Kokomo, Indiana, the other day told her friends that her time had come to die. She was afflicted with asthma, but her case was not considered at a dangerous stage. Mrs. Alt had a collection of flowers on exhibition at the Knights of Pythias Hall at Galveston, 8 miles northwest of Kokomo. She took the flowers from the hall to a church, remarking that a funeral would occur there during the week, and those particular chrysanthemums would be appropriate for the casket. She arranged the collection near the pulpit in an oblong square the size and form of a coffin. On leaving the church, she said to a friend, "Those are for my coffin, and I will be there this week." She then closed various business matters with neighbors and went home. She retired early, saying to her family, "Do not call me for breakfast." In the morning, she was found dead in bed. Death was from natural causes. The funeral took place the next day just as she had arranged, the flowers she took to the church adorning the casket.
Wow.
Yeah, that is very creepy.
That is creepy, although 1900s, I wonder if she had just found a way to end things without being traceable.
Not detectable.
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely possible. They did have alienists back then, which is like basically they did like autopsies and stuff.
Yeah.
But that wasn't, I mean, of course not everywhere is going to have it. And you're like, 8 miles outside of Kokomo, Indiana, there might not be an alienist who's like too worried about it. But that's just so weird. Like, yeah, she has asthma, but like she's doing fine.
Sure.
Very strange.
Or 7 days prior, she watched The Ring.
Oh, you know what? That was probably it.
And she was like, well, I got 7 days to get my affairs in order.
Yeah, nothing I can do about it now. Yeah, in case you didn't know, guys, that's actually a little known fact, but The Ring from the 2000s was a remake of Ye Olde Ring from 1899. So.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you for joining me on this deliciously death positive journey. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave us a rating or review. Check out our Instagram at fantastichpod, or shoot us an email at fantastichistorypod@gmail.com to let us know. Stay spooky, my friends.